Hey dear audience, today we are going to talk about the narrative techniques in the Moth, a novel by Mohsin Hamid. First of all, we are going to see that what is basically the narrative writing, what is its definition. Narrative writing is a form of writing where where an author tells a story. The story may include multiple characters or it may even none at all. No? First of all, we should have to differentiate that narrative writing is something else and the narrative techniques are different one. So here we are discussing about the narrative writings. But as every writing might be a narrative writing, particularly fiction, so that carries a particular some devices of narrative techniques and devices. First, we discuss that what is basically the narrative structural analysis, in which Ronald Barthes has writes that there are countless forms of narratives in the world. Means there is not even a single story without narrative. Every story has a particular narrative technique, and that the infinite variety of the forms are present at all times in all the places in all the societies. Means every society have its own stories and every stories have a particular narrative. Barthes observed that narrative starts with the very history of the mankind. Means the art of telling the story, art of presenting one's point of view is as old as is the history of the mankind. There has never been anywhere any people without narrative. He says Barthes is of the point of view that on this earth there have been never any men without the narrative. So all the societies, all the classes, all the human groups have their stories. Language might be the different one, but narratives are there, and very often those stories are enjoyed by the men of different and even opposite cultural backgrounds. Means from the narrative, from the stories, we come to know the culture of different. For example, if I am a Pakistani, I want to look at the culture of the American, its myths, so I would be reading its stories. uh, like life itself, narrative means life itself is a narrative. So if we want to the look of a particular life of a particular person or a group, we would be very much intended towards looking at their stories or the narratives. Is there international, trans-historical and trans-cultural as well? I mean, for example, the narratives give us the point of view or some substantial essence of that some particular nation, some history or some culture. So we come to know that narratives is a short how we place ourselves spatially or temporarily in the world. Narrative is how we conceptualize the past. For example, if we are going to look at the function of the narrative past, and it is how we are able to conceive of a future. It is how we create every kind of conceivable common social meaning and the unity. We take pieces from the madness. If we talk of the Hamlet, so that's have a particular concept, and create a trajectory, a causality, a lineage without which we would have arguably no identity and no language. So up till here we have developed a stance that every story is a type of narrative, of a particular kind of narrative. So as Mohsin Hamid's Moth Smoke is a particular story of a haves and haves not, a elite class and a poor class, and a woman's stance, and it is there. So it's a narrative. Now we in the further we would be looking at what sort of devices, literary devices, he has used to present this story. Mohsin Hamid's work seeks to uncover and unmask these commonalities, providing a narrative which can perhaps allow empathy to be by unmasking the deeper foundational aspect of the global system. rather than promoting ethnic and racial divides which are culturally constructed and our recent studies have shown empirically unfounded. His novels demonstrate that access to the monetary, this is the very essence, cultural essence of Pakistan, that anyone uh, who has the money, he enjoy a social prestige, and the one who does not have money, he doesn't he have even no he is charged by every crime, and even he has no right to live. This is the very cultural study of Pakistan, and cultural capital are much more formative in determining how and by what means humans can globally and interdependently both exist and coexist. So here are now we would be counting and discussing those narrative techniques which Mohsin Hamid has used in his novel Moth Smoke, one by one. First, we would be discussing the type of that narrative technique, and then we would be discussing its context in the novel Moth Smoke. The main characters jumps back and forth. For example, the flashback technique is used in the novel, in the story, and the same flashback technique has been used by Mohsin Hamid. In the flashback technique, main character jumps back and forth between the events in the past and present to tell his story. Writers use the flashback techniques to provide the background information about a narrative. Characters in a story can flash back in the times using a variety of methods such as dream, sequence, and retelling of the memories. This is basically the definition of the flashback. But if we look at the particular our novel of discussion, Moth Smoke, so there are the historical references, Aurangzeb, Uzi, who is the representing Humayun, Dara Shiku Shehzad. So even at the very opening of the novel, there are historical references. So history has been looked back in this novel by the technique of flashback. And if we Mumtaz recounts her past, a sense of revenge against Uzi. If we at the end of discussion of the novel we say that why Mumtaz was having an illicit relationship with Daru, the evident reason which we come to know that she was not expecting the character of Uzi in her marriage life as they were going to on. She has romanticized Aurangzeb more than he was at the present. So her inherent reason or the dominant reason which she creates the illicit relationship with Daru is the sense of revenge, as Aurangzeb has been very romantic in his pre-marriage life. So Mumtaz also recounts her past. Even Daru was the class fellow of Uzi. So how they have been in the past, he also remembers his past. Every character in this novel, whether it's Mumtaz, whether it's Uzi, or whether it's Daru, they have a flashback towards their past. So we established that Mohsin Hamid has used the technique of flashback in this novel, Moth Smoke. Then decentering towards the local context. This is also a technique which usually the writers used. For example, if we take the stance of this most important shift Hamid exemplifies in the foregrounding of the economics rather than the culture, as in the multiculturalism, that it is this emphasis which allows his fiction to change the way the globalized system can be examined. For example, if we talk about with reference to the character of Daru, we have three layers. On the one level, he has decentered the pre-partition political context in his novel. That means there are references about Aurangzeb, Alamgir, and Darashiku Shehzad, and Mumtaz, who has been on her name the Taj Mahal has been constructed. So from that story he has localized the context of the story of Dara Shikoh Shehzad, Uzi and Mumtaz in Pakistan living in Lahore. Though they were the political characters, there is a difference of time difference between the occurrence or the lifetime of the Dara Shikoh Shehzad, Aurangzeb and Mumtaz, and these characters which are living right now in Lahore. And the other one, he has decentered the global context. For example, when this novel was written in 2000, and in the opening that we see that it was a heated time when the Pakistan has experimented the atomic bombs in Jagi, and the situation of Pakistan in the political scenario was off at the difficult times, and how he has constructed this degeneration of our social institutions in Pakistan. For example, police take a bribe of 20 rupees from Dara Shikoh Shehzad and keep him going on. The other technique, which is the foreshadowing, and the foreshadowing technique has been implemented by Mohsin Hamid. This technique, using the foreshadowing technique, a writer can give readers clues about the events to come. These clues may be obvious or subtle. Narrative writers foreshadow the future events using literary devices such as dialogue and the symbols. About the dialogue and symbols we would be talking later on. With reference to this novel, if we talk about of this foreshadowing technique, so in the very early pages of the novel we see that the moth and its burning images has been shown, which later on refers to the future of Daru. In the early pages of the novel we see that Moth has been killed and it was burnt on the and its smoke was rising from the upper side when its moth burned. Similarly, from the burning of Moth we can predict the future of Daru, who has been later on been convicted on the account of a murder of a child. Similarly, the diffusion and the breakdown of electricity and the AC of the Dara Shikoh Shehzad Daru was not working in the initial pages of the novel, so it refers to the damnation of Daru. So through different symbols he has projected foregrounded. As you know that we use the word chorus. So foreshadowing is more like the chorus, which refers to the incidents which are going to happen to the next. So in the initial pages, the symbol of Moth or the fate of Moth and the breakdown of electricity refers to the damnation and the future of Daru. So we are able to establish that the foreshadowing technique has been used in the novel Moth Smoke. Then there is the concept of dual narrative, which even Mohsin Hamid has used in it. Writers using the dual narrative techniques tell stories using two perspectives. This is an effective way to give readers details about an event, character, or scene. So if we look at the Moth Smoke, so there are the political stories which refers to the Pakistan, and even if we take that Uzi, Mumtaz, and Dara Shikoh Shehzad, all these characters refers to another story which have been happening some 200 or 150 years before the current plot of the novel. Means Aurangzeb Alamgir have been nearly residing 200 years before these characters. So at the same time, this is the story of Dara Shikoh Shehzad, Mumtaz, and Uzi, who are currently moving in the city of Lahore, and it is also the story of political narrative, political stance, or political characters which have been happened 200 years before. Similarly, it also refers to the political situations of Pakistan. Atomic bombs explosion references have been used, and the concept of heat has been means when the there were atomic bomb explosions, then there was extensive heat in Pakistan. So at the turning of the age, as in political reference, there was 2000, 2011, and the Pakistani relations with America and other global context has been at the very uncertain situation after the testing of atom bombs. Similarly, it has presented a social context where in Pakistan means at the same time it is referring to the relationship of Uzi, the Rashikul Shehzad, and Mumtaz, but it is also revealing the present prevailing uncertain social situation in Pakistan, where the richer grow more rich and the poor grow more poorer. So it also tells the story. It means at the same time, if we call it as a love story, or a familial story, or a story of friends, in which Aurangzeb, Daru, and Mumtaz were involved in this trajectory, but at the same time it is also representing the social chaos prevailing in Pakistan. Similarly, educational discriminations have been represented by this dual narrative, that for a rich man like Khurram Shah, whose son was Aurangzeb, he was bound to study in America, while the person like Daru, he was bound to study in the local schools, and later on he left his education. Similarly, it has presented the corruption in Pakistan. So these dual narratives, even if we look very at the novel, it is telling a lot of stories. It is not presenting a single perspective. At the same time, it is the story of the illicit sexual relations. At the same time, it is the story of haves and haves not. At the same time, it is a story of corruption prevailing in Pakistan. At the same time, it is a story of the Pakistan's relationship with other countries. At the same time, it is the story of a political fable as a history, which has been of the Aurangzeb, Mumtaz, and Uzi, the Rashikul Shehzad, some 2 years before to the happening of this story. So by this dual narrative, here I am not talking of the two stories. Dual means a lot of stories, a lot of narratives, a lot of perspectives are involved in this novel. Then there is the technique of dialogue. Through this technique, the writers engage their readers into the form of dialogue, so that it might be interesting, and it gives, dialogue means to talk with one another. So the dialogue gives the authenticity of communication and authenticity of experience. Dialogue is another technique that authors use to tell their stories. Dialogue is a direct speech between two characters, and it brings the readers more close to the reality. So if we talk about the Moth smokes Mohsin Hamid's, there are a lot of conversation between Uzi and Mumtaz. There are a lot of conversation between Daru and Mumtaz, and there is the conversation between bank manager and the Daru, and there is a conversation between the landlords and the Daru when he was in the bank and they were conversating with one another. So they also reflect. So for example, he says that I am the employee of the bank, not of the landlord. So as the landlord says that I will see you, so these things reflect the realities, true realities as well. Then there is the shift in time. These authors also use the shift in time within the novels as the narrative technique. A flashback is when the story line jumps backward to show something that happens before the main events of the novel, and that has relevance to the present story. If we see here the characters of Aurangzeb, Mumtaz, and Daru, so they are revealing their revealing this shift in time. For example, Aurangzeb has been in love with Mumtaz a very much time before their marriage. This aspect of the story has been revealed. If we come to the know that first they come, that Uzi was the wife, Mumtaz was the wife of Uzi, and Daru was their friend. But later on, the narrative techniques as the story shift back to the childhood of Aurangzeb and Daru, and similarly the pre-marriage love of Aurangzeb and Mumtaz. Another technique which the writers usually use to narrate their story, and that's an important narrative technique as well, that's of the symbolism. A symbol is a thing that signifies something else. Symbols in the novels are often ambiguous one, and if we see in the novel Moth Smoke, we see a lot of symbols which refers to the story. For example, 2 or 3 I have counted over here, the symbol of moth, the symbol of smoke, and the symbol of AC, and the symbol of heroine, which the Rashiku Shehzad, that was the symbol of destruction basically. Heroine, and that has been provided by the rickshaw driver. So we see that Mohsin Hamid has also narrated his story through the symbols. These are the major narrative techniques which Mohsin Hamid has employed in his novel. In case of any question, you may contact me. Goodbye. Thank you.